We're going to go ahead and get started tonight. So welcome to Altered States Integration virtual platform. Just a little bit about us. Tonight's presenter is Toby, and this is Elizabeth E.J. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the legal issues surrounding altered states and psychedelics. Our company specializes in peer coaching and integration groups. If you're not sure what integration is, that's where you come and talk to somebody about the messages, themes, and visions, maybe even that you had, stories that you were given during your altered state experiences, and we help make those real. We help take those and they can become part of you. If it was a difficult experience, we can make that really not make, but really it's more about helping you process that in a way that makes it so that you can move forward in your life and have it be a lesson learned. And we work with people who are also looking for healing. We also do harm reduction at festivals, concerts, and events, and that's about kind of like the safe sex of psychedelics. So we don't think that people aren't going to do these things, but we think that they can do them safer for their mind and for their body and for their partners. And that's what we're about. That's what we're here tonight, is to help you guys have information. Information is power. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. Altered States Integration owners and operators are not licensed therapists and do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure diseases. Peer coaches do not assess individuals for mental health conditions, nor provide. Does not condone, encourage, purchase, sale, or transfer of illegal substances, nor do they encourage or condone partaking in any unlawful activities related to illegal substances. Any correspondence violating these terms to or on Altered States Integration websites will be ignored, deleted, and blocked. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Toby.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that introduction. Tonight is part 2 of our Psychedelic Healing 101 course. Tonight we're going to dig into the ever-changing landscape of legalization and decriminalization. So let's get to it. I think a good place to always start with this discussion is to go over a couple terms. A lot of people think that decriminalization is legalization, and that's just not true. So let's just start with getting some terminology out of the way. So legalization is the process of removing a drug from the scheduling that the DEA has it scheduled as. Right now, psilocybin is a Schedule I substance, which means according to the DEA, there is no medical use for these substances, and they have a high potential for abuse and dependence. The DEA's website lists the following as effects caused by psilocybin use. They say that psilocybin can cause hallucinations, large amounts can cause panic attacks and psychosis, nausea and vomiting, muscle weakness, a lack of coordination, and that overdose may result in psychosis or death. So I just want to point out that according to the DEA, there is no medicinal benefit from these substances, and we just know that's not true by the process of science at this point. So decriminalization is a large part of what we're talking about tonight, and decriminalization is the process that removes criminal charges from an action. But this still leaves associated laws and regulations intact. So a lot of times in this conversation, what that's going to look like is something will be decriminalized at a city or state level, but at the federal level, they are still considered these Schedule I substances, and possession or buying and selling of them is a felony. So the way that decriminalization usually works with the law is by making it at the lowest arrest priority. And what that means is the lowest arrest priority is that police officers will prioritize this underneath everything else. So basically, jaywalking is a larger crime than consumption of psilocybin mushrooms in Denver, where these are a lowest arrest priority. However, buying and selling of these substances is still illegal and is a felony. These are Schedule I substances, so state and federal police officers are behooven to arrest you if they see you with these substances. one of the interesting things about decriminalization is that there's not necessarily a legal limit that you can carry. With cannabis, in most states, there's a legal limit of 1 ounce or 2 ounces, and that's how much you can carry legally. With decriminalization, this limit, as of now, is not really in place. So you can possess any amount of these substances, and according to the city or state laws, wherever it's decriminalized, this is okay. Again, this isn't recognized by federal law enforcement, so don't run into federal law enforcement if you have mushrooms on you. They will still consider it a felony. So there's two main ways that we've seen so far for decriminalization efforts to happen. The first is ballot measures, and this is what happened in Denver. Ballot measures have a two-part process. First, you have to go around and get signatures on this initiative before it even becomes a ballot initiative. And once you have all these signatures required, and the amount of signatures varies depending on the amount of area basically that you're trying to cover. So Decriminalize California is a decriminalized effort that is coming up in 2020, and they are going to need 1.1 million signatures. Now, Denver was much less than that. I think Denver needed about 40,000 signatures to get on the ballot. So this takes a while to get all these signatures needed and then to spend campaign advertising dollars and then have a vote. This might be more democratic, though, depending on how you define democracy. Letting everybody vote on these issues might be important. So that's one of the benefits I think that ballot measures have. Now, the other way that we've seen these substances become decriminalized is through a city council initiative. And that's where local city or state officials pass a law that says we should decriminalize these substances. So this can be done pretty quickly. Ballot initiatives take a long time, but a city council initiative is one vote by your city council, and it could be made illegal or legal or decriminalized. Anything could happen from a city council initiative, and it sometimes can be done quickly. Other times it has to be voted on multiple times. It has to go through safety committees. So it's not necessarily quick. It just has the potential to be quick. So Denver was the first place to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms. On May 7th, 2019, Denver, the city, voted for making psilocybin mushrooms a lowest arrest priority. Now, this was a ballot measure. Signatures were gathered to get it on the ballot, and then everybody voted. And it was very, very close. As you can see in this image, less than 3,000 votes separated yes from no. So very close vote, but Denver was the first place to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms in the United States this spring. Quickly after Denver, we have Oakland. And on June 4th, less than a month after the Denver initiative, Oakland voted to decriminalize nature. And this was through a city council initiative. So the Oakland City Council voted and they effectively decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms. And the cool thing about Oakland is they have a decriminalized nature vote. So in addition to just psychedelic mushrooms, Oakland decriminalized the use of all entheogenic plants. So that includes psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, ibogaine, and a couple psychedelic cactus are all decriminalized in Oakland. And those are the two places that have established decriminalization efforts right now. Right now, we're going to talk about a couple places that are in the process of decriminalization. Chicago right now has a city council initiative or is in the process of getting a city council initiative. On October 19th, members of the Chicago's Committee on Health and Human Relations, they unanimously voted 50-0 on a resolution supporting entheogenic plant practices. So that would basically be the same thing as decriminalize nature. They would decriminalize the adult use of entheogenic plants on the Schedule 1 list of the federal. And they are making this in a lowest arrest priority for the city of Chicago and the Chicago Police Department. So right now, they're in a 90-day review process. And after the 90-day review process, there will most likely be a final vote on the decriminalization effort. And then Santa Cruz is another place that has a city council initiative that is moving forward. So recently, Santa Cruz voted unanimously to advance the proposal to the Public Safety Committee for further review. So like I said earlier, sometimes with city council initiatives, there is a lot of meetings and discussion and votes that have to happen before it actually makes it into the body of law. And then Decriminalize California is a decriminalized effort on the whole state level that's happening right now in California. They're hoping to be on the 2020 ballot. So out of Oakland, something cool has happened. In addition to just being decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms, this whole movement has kind of started growing called Decriminalized Nature Movement. So Decriminalized Nature believes that it is our inalienable right to develop our own relationship with nature. And they say that we should be able to grow, gather, and gift these substances. So a lot of cities and states now have a decriminalized nature movement. Last I checked, it was 15 different initiatives that were in progress, and I'm sure there's more happening all the time. It's a pretty rapidly expanding effort. So the decriminalization effort is live and well in the United States. And most of the world follows the United States drug policy, but not the whole world. So here's a couple places that have decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms, not decriminalized, sorry, that have legalized psilocybin mushrooms. Jamaica, Bahamas, Brazil, and Samoa all have legal psilocybin mushrooms. So you can grow them, you can buy them, you can sell them, you can transport them, all within the law. Now, the British Virgin Islands has consumption and possession legal, but sale and transport of these substances is illegal but unenforced, which is kind of interesting. So you can have these mushrooms, but you can't bring them anywhere else, and you can't sell them to anybody. And then the Netherlands also has legal psilocybin in a unique form. The Netherlands has truffles instead of psilocybin mushrooms. So these truffles still contain psilocybin. They will make you trip. They are just the pre-fruiting body of the psilocybin. And there's this medical legalization model that we're also seeing starting to develop out of Oregon. So this is a ballot initiative. Right now they are gathering signatures to get it on the ballot for 2020. And this is a little bit different. This isn't a decriminalization effort. It started off as a decriminalization effort, but that's since been removed from the ballot language. This is a medicinal model for therapist access. So this initiative won't mean that magic mushrooms are legal everywhere in the state. Instead, the measure would allow manufacture, delivery, and administration of psilocybin at supervised, licensed facilities. So backers of this have until July 2nd, 2020 to get 112,020 signatures to get on the November 2020 ballot. So a lot of work goes into getting a ballot initiative on the ballot. But this, if they can get on the ballot, means that all of Oregon will have the option to vote on this medicinal legalization model. So this is a really complicated issue. A lot of people smarter than me are talking about the advantages of the legal medical model or the advantages of the decriminalization model. And I think there's some advantages of both, and the right answer probably lies a little bit in between. But let's just go over some of the issues that people are talking about with both models. So the legal medicinal model is very, very expensive. Right now, MAPS, who's developing the MDMA for PTSD protocol, is expecting that it's going to cost about $15,000 for a full treatment. Now, that's going to include the medicine, the therapy time, all of the before and after care that's involved with the psychedelic experience. But no matter how you look at it, $15,000 for a treatment is very expensive. Now, insurance might take care of some of this at some point, but new cutting edge treatments usually aren't eligible for insurance until there's data that shows that these are just as effective, if not more effective, than existing treatments. And another place where this protocol is very expensive is from training the therapists themselves. In order to get approved for the MAPS MDMA training, it's going to cost you around $9,000, which is a lot for a certification that may or may not be very good in this opening world of psychedelic therapy. So some of the pros about the legal model is this training should end up producing some highly trained practitioners. which is important when you're dealing with medicines like this, to have people who are familiar with working in this space. Another advantage of a legal model is that you're going to have pure substances. These substances are made in a lab. They're not made by drug dealers. They are made in a pharmaceutical lab to pharmaceutical standards. So some cons about decriminalization is that there's no mandatory testing. So it's kind of the flip side of this pure substances from the legal side, legal medicinal model, is decriminalization doesn't have any of this testing. So there's not necessarily going to be worse substances, but you're having to rely on your drug dealer caring. Some drug dealers do care, some dealers don't and just care about money. And there's no quality control for practitioners in a decriminalization model. So anybody can say, yes, I'm a psilocybin guide, come take psilocybin with me in a decriminalization model, theoretically. And there wouldn't be any way to quality control this, unlike the medicinal model where you have these trainings and licensures. Some pros about decriminalization. The price should stay low. There's not this pharmaceutical machine trying to make as much money as possible out of it. And decriminalization, if done right, also has a lot to offer in terms of resetting and repairing these drug convictions. A lot of cannabis models that I see proposed recently have licenses going to people who were unfairly harmed by the war on drugs. So I think that some decriminalization efforts, if done right, can help reverse some of the harm that the war on drugs has done to our society since the 70s. So I guess that channels pretty well into some of the social justice issues that are associated with the war on drugs. The war on drugs has been shown over and over again to be racially motivated. Scientifically, as far as science can show, white people and black people, people of color, use drugs at the same rate. The incarceration rate for minorities and POCs is outstandingly higher than arrest rates for white people, even though science says that drugs are used at about the same rate throughout all ethnicities. And I think there's a lot of stigmatization that comes from this. And I've definitely seen this existing in psychedelic spaces. Psychedelic spaces seem like they are very white. And I don't know how we fix it. Again, just another issue that people smarter than me have been discussing is that white people feel safe to discuss these psychedelics, but other people, not so much. So I think it's important that we open up this conversation to everyone involved and just acknowledge that the war on drugs is a war on us, and specifically a war on our minorities. So what can we do about it? I've talked a lot about this medicinal model versus decriminalization model and some of the effects that the war on drugs has had, but what can we do about it ourselves? So get involved, I think, is the first and probably foremost option, is do something about it. Don't just talk about it, be about it. The Decriminalize Denver initiative was very small. It's a grassroots campaign at its heart. So I think that anybody can get involved and start making some change. Talk to Decriminalize Nature. If there's not a chapter in your area, start a chapter. Their website's decriminalizenature.org. The Drug Policy Alliance, they have this one right here. We are the Drug Policy Alliance. They have a sticker I really, really like that says the war on drugs is a war on us. And I think it's true. So they are one of the foremost groups that are doing policy work in the drug sphere. And then besides that, call your congressmen, call your local representatives, tell them that you think that it's important that people's lives aren't ruined for this. Send them a letter. A lot of my friends who are in politics says that voicemails can be deleted, but letters, somebody has to open them up. So maybe send them a letter every week till they do something about it. And then the last thing I can think of as a way to get involved is SSDP. SSDP is the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and they are a collegiate group that focuses on reversing the harm from the war on drugs. Thank you guys so much for listening. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Toby. That was excellent. We have some questions coming in the chat. Excellent. Thank you, Toby. I feel like I learn more about this topic every time that you talk about it. We have a couple questions in the chat box, and if anybody has any other questions or comments, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. I think this first question I'm going to field, and the participant is talking about psychedelic cannabis being administered in therapy sessions in Colorado, and what the legality is behind this. And Toby can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but from a prescription model, I would say that it is probably not being, quote, administered by your therapist, but if you come to your session and you participate in that, then they can, just as if you came drunk to a therapy session, they can still have therapy with you, that there'd be no prohibition with that. Do you have any insight into that, Toby?
Yeah, so I'm actually aware of a group of some therapists called Medicinal Mindfulness out of Boulder, Colorado, and they are doing cannabis breathwork sessions. So they are therapists in practice, but I don't think this is a therapeutic session, but they basically are helping create a container for cannabis use. So I've done a session with them. It's very psychedelic, and it uses cannabis and breathwork as the medicine.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the question there, Toby, is, or for me, would be, did you bring your own, or was it something that they provided?
So you brought your own to the session I went to, but I think there was also cannabis provided if you would rather smoke their
Hmm.
blend than what you
Mhm.
brought.
Interesting. Great information. Um, let's see. I love this from Jamie. She is, um, voicing a concern about the exclusion of low income persons. Toby, what is your response to that?
Yeah, so I talked about that a little bit in my conversation, but I really think that is a big issue. As we're seeing these psychedelic drugs become more mainstream, we're also seeing the influx of money into these systems. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. MAPS is planning on charging a bunch of money for MDMA sessions, and then that money will be used to continue psychedelic research. But I think access is a real issue. And I think one of the things that decriminalization offers is hopefully easier access. Not necessarily better access, but I just think in terms of access, decriminalization might help you access it cheaper than $15,000 from MAPS. And obviously, it's not the same experience, but I think that a lot of these psychedelic medicines are going to be out of people's reach, unfortunately, with the price tag that's being associated with them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and if I can add about that, um, I think that that's where we have a lot of work and power in the advocacy arena for people who are, even if you're not a therapist, even if you're coming into this as someone who is looking for treatment or looking for healing from psychedelics, that, when we discuss these things, we need to continue to discuss the replication to these people who have been charged with these crimes, for people who are in jail for minor marijuana offenses and minor drug offenses for a long periods of time, for decades, and they're, because they're minorities, and getting social programs in place, because we need to kind of right the balance that's there. We need to kind of undo some of that damage that was done. And I think that part of that is being able to bring some of these therapies in, finding grant money, and making it an issue that this is not like, a white solution to these problems. um, great conversation. I think someone had kind of asked a little bit further about, related to therapists losing their license for administering their own blends in a session. That would be much more of a therapy question. Toby and I are not therapists. We can only go off of what our experience has been with different situations. I can make some guesses for coming from the medical side of things. I think that there's a lot of gray areas that are happening, and many therapists are taking a big leap into the gray area faithfully, that their community is going to take care of them and that it's worth the risk. because ultimately, like Toby said earlier, decriminalization is not legalization, and that we have a federal government that is criminalizing. So, you know, I'm not sure as something that's commentary if anybody's aware, but when California became medical marijuana years ago, the DEA was still raiding farms. So it's not like that stopped. The federal government was still taking actions that it had taken for decades in California in the Green Triangle. And so people were still worried about those actions. So even though we're kind of in this strange area, the people who are doing that, honestly, we should really honor them for the risk that they're taking, because they are moving mountains with what they're doing, and they're not waiting around for policy change. So I don't know the answer to that question, but if you want to send us an email with that question, we might be able to hook you up with a therapist. Toby can give you the information to speak to that therapist if you want to know more about the legal implications. I'm happy to pass you along. Let's see, we have another comment from Jamie.
Yeah, let's see. I met a lady at Burning Man who's advocating for having these substances purchasable by anyone. She was lecturing with Rick Doblin and Gomez. Do you know who this lady is? She talked about being able to get them in a store. I didn't catch who she was. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with who you're talking about, but I definitely am an advocate personally of a full legalization model like we see with cannabis. Access to a lot of these substances, I think, on a cultural level isn't really accepted, but I think there's a lot of public health benefits from being able to get access to clean substances and have a safe environment to get knowledge. I think we're a really long ways away from safe as a society, but I understand that's a controversial idea, just being able to go in and buy any substance. But I think that in the future, maybe we'll see something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So Jamie, if since this was at Burning Man, I'm going to go ahead and say that the camp that this was at was likely called Playa School. It's Plya school, and they may have that information on their website or social media for what their speaker list was, and then you can find out who that particular person was. So there's a way to kind of maybe step back and find out who that clinician was. Yes,
All
and
right.
legalization for MDMA through the FDA is very near. I don't know if everybody saw the news broadcast today or yesterday that psilocybin has, I can't remember the terminology that they use, but it's critical access medicine. There was a law
treatment.
A few years ago changed, and it was a very big deal for any medicine, is that there's now a new classification of drugs that people, drugs can either be classified as immediate access, meaning that it doesn't have to go through the same testing because of the potential, or if somebody has a disease that is fatal, that they can participate in a research model with a drug that's still experimental because they can't wait another 10 years for legalization of that medication. And so that's kind of legislation at its finest, in the sense that that's working, and that we're able to push things along quicker than we were 10 or 20 years ago. Really, things are moving much faster. Everything tonight was really great. Thank you, Toby, for your excellent presentation. Thank you for all the neurohackers and psychonauts that came out tonight to watch this presentation. We appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing individually. And come check us out at alteredstatesintegration.com /resources for more resources. Check out our blogs, and come integrate with us. We'd love to hear what your stories are and help you make the most of your altered states. Have a good night.